Welcome, everyone, to Time to Thrive. This is your host, Bethany Meadows, and today's guest is Roy Osing, a former president, CMO, and entrepreneur with over 40 years of executive leadership experience. As president of a major data and internet company, his out-of-the-box leadership style took the company from its early stage to over $1 billion in annual sales. He is a blogger, content marketer, and mentor to young professionals. He is the author of a no-nonsense book series called Be Different or Be Dead. We're going to have to ask him about that. He is passionate about inspiring leaders, entrepreneurs, and organizations to stand apart from the average and achieve their true potential. Welcome to the show, Roy.
Thanks very much. I appreciate being here.
I appreciate you being here as well. And as we always do, we ask our guests to pick a number between 1 and 5, and that will depend on what your first question will be.
I'll take 6.
I can pick another card. I've had people do that to me before.
I'll take half a 6, which is, I think, 3 the last time I looked.
Okay, so the question is, if you were captain of a ship, what would you call it?
I would call it a Shea. And the reason for that is I had a boat and we called her a Shea, and the Shea is Sanskrit for a peaceful place. And so that was my go-to place to get away from it all, to clear my head and relax with my family and create experiences that quite frankly were so memorable and will always be with me. And so, yeah, that's what it would be. Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. See, I mean, I love these questions because they are so random, but we get this like real insight into you that we weren't expecting, and there would be no way for me to know. So I think that's awesome. You know, I live on a lake, so my peaceful place is going down and pulling out my kayak, and when it's real early in the morning and nobody's out there yet, and the water's like glass. That's my peaceful place.
It does not get any better. We boated as a family for 17 years on the West Coast, up and down. And it's the same thing, getting up in the morning, right, with that little bit of mist coming off the water. And I can see a humpback whale every once in a while. I mean, it just doesn't get any better than that.
Right, right. Well, you're in Vancouver, which is an absolutely gorgeous part of the country up there in Canada, and someplace that I've actually been before, so I know how beautiful it is. And so let's get started with, because I'm really intrigued by this whole idea of be different or be dead. So what was the idea behind that?
Well, to put it in a nutshell, I mean, it's basically been my life's journey in terms of business, career, personal life. And the genesis really was the fact that I observed very, very young in my career that because I came from the telecom business in that particular time when it was being morphed into a highly competitive business with lots of competitors, et cetera. My conclusion was that we weren't ready, that we needed to really break away from some of the traditional things that we did, and we had to move into a what laterally called a be different sort of mode. If we are indeed going to survive and beat competition. So I started thinking about, what were the sort of things that were traditional that weren't working, and how could we move away from those, and how could we substitute those things for more practical things. And I kept working this, and it applied to careers, et cetera. And then finally, I mean, I was asked to lead a company at the time when the internet was just starting. And so we did that and basically applied some of the be different or be dead philosophy to this business. And remarkably, and I get goosebumps just thinking about it again, to be honest, we grew it to over $1 billion in sales. That business today is worth $16 billion in annual revenues. And so I look back upon that and said, wow, look what we were able to do with simple things that lit fires in people. This was not textbook stuff that I basically promulgated, to be honest. I mean, it was pretty simple stuff that people went, let's do that, but led to unbelievable performance. So the notion of be different is who I am. It's what I do. It's what we talk about all the time and what I search for. And quite frankly, to be honest, what I criticize in terms of organizations today, because they're not doing a good job of differentiation. And I think it's a major issue. And so hopefully conversations like this will help improve businesses one by one to be just a little, get out of the box, get out of the academia, start thinking about different things. So that's
Yeah.
me.
Well, one of the things I find with small business owners that they really resist the idea of of narrowing themselves, like understanding like a customer segment that they have or a niche that they have. They want to be for all people because they're just so fearful of missing a sale or missing a customer, that they don't want to declare themselves as serving a more narrow group. And that's really a lot of times where we find our differential is when we serve, a particular group. We solve a particular problem for a particular group. We have a very powerful and relevant message if we do that.
Yeah, I agree. Look at the one size fits all and going after, mass marketing in hopes that we don't miss an opportunity. In my experience, is a tough goal because it's an inefficient use of resources. And I know small businesses, I work a lot with them. They hate talking about this, right? They really don't want to plan anyways. They just want to kind of react and respond to people coming in, etc. And yet, the secret to figuring out what makes you special is all about deciding who you want to serve. And it's a piece that must be dealt with. Look, I had to create what I called my strategic game planning process and get away from pedantic strategic planning because it just didn't help me. It wasn't based on execution. It was based on application of theoretical principles. Well, my problem was I had to execute. I had to implement to drive performance. So I had to create my own planning process. And it's really simple. It goes like this. How big do you want to be? Which is a question about your top line revenue growth in 24 months, because 5-year plans don't exist. Right. And the second question, or at least it gives you permission to practice the hockey stick in the 4th year, which never shows up, which I always laugh at anyway. But the second question is, where are you going to get the money? And that's the who do you want to serve piece that you and I just referred to. It's being able to identify a customer set that has the latent potential to give you the revenue targets that you're going after. And if you don't do that, unfortunately, you really sort of spread your resources thin and you waste a lot of time and energy. But the real critical piece of that is the third question, which says, once you figure that out, how are you going to compete and win? So I had to create my own way of differentiation, and it's called the only statement. Okay, there's far too much what I call claptrap being talked about in the world today around differentiation. And you've heard it, right? Well, we're the best at, we're better than, we're number one, we're the market leader, but blah, 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 blah. Because claptrap means nothing.
Right. Everybody's saying it.
Everybody's saying it, and customers' eyes just glaze over, right? They get their pupils dilate and they just slip into a coma when they hear this crap, right? So I had to create what I call the only statement. It's really simple. It goes like this. We are the only ones who. And this is one thing that I've been really trying to work with, particularly small business, in doing, is if you can define yourself in an only statement, which is measurable, observable, and it can be proven. If you can do that, if you can find that juice to make you the only one, then man, do you ever have a leg up in the market? And it forces you to talk about in a granular way what makes you special, okay, in a way that people care about. And the linkage between what I call the who and the only is so tight that if you don't have that who defined, going back to the original point, then you're creating an only statement for cyberspace. You're creating an only statement for the clouds. Okay, it has to attach to something, and that something is defining the customer set you want to go after. So, I mean, it's just it's tough. I mean, it's like dragging people through the door to make them do this, especially small business, because they're out there working every day. They don't want to do this anyways, right? They just don't. But it's so important. So the only statement was probably the key plank that helped us really, really get good leverage against what I call the competitive hordes in the days where the monopoly world was transitioning into a competitive one.
Right, right. You have a book. I guess it's your latest book called Audacious Unheard of Ways. What's that all about?
Yeah,
What's
so that's the seventh and latest book in my Be Different or Be Dead series, and it came out in May. And thank you very much for asking. But what I've tried to do is identify what I call audacious, unheard of ways we took a startup to $1 billion, and it's all based on this whole notion of being different, differentiation, focus on execution, leading by serving around, operational excellence, leadership, focusing on the front line, cutting the crap, killing dumb rules, hiring for goosebumps. All those things you will not find in marketing or HR 101, but you will find in Roy's books. And so what I've tried to do is pull together these practical, proven things that work so well for us and say, look, at this piece is different than what you've been taught, right? You were never taught to hire for goosebumps. And yet, if you want to provide memorable customer services, you better hire people that like Homo sapiens. And there's a way of doing that, right? And I just created this goosebumps, model to do it, to talk about it. And so that's what the book is. It's an updated version of a book that I wrote in 2009 called Be Different or Be Dead, Your Business Survival Guide. So I've been at this for a while. All right. So it's an updated and kind of refocused version of the original one, but the content is basically the same. And that shows, it speaks to, I guess, the fact that there hasn't been a ton of progress at this level of thinking in how to make organizations perform at a breathless level. And so I decided to kind of update it and come back in and have another go at it and hopefully get more people on board, because I'm tired of reading we are the best customer service provider. I'm tired of reading we're the #1 market leader in North America. Hogwash, gibberish. You got to be the only at something.
I often say to business owners that you are the ceiling for your business. A business cannot go past the leadership of the organization. You talk about audacious leadership. What's that about? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, very good. And you're absolutely right. It is all about leadership. I mean, if it weren't for me personally, we would not have had a hiring for goosebumps resource people program. Okay, it was just the way my head works. I chose audacious for a very special reason, because it connotes boldness and it connotes breaking away from tradition. And it's not that tradition is wrong. It's just that it doesn't work in a world now that's changing so rapidly on us. We just have to move. And so let me give you a couple of examples. I believe in execution. I don't believe, we should be spending 80% of our time planning. We should get it just about right, head west, and then spend 80% of our time figuring out how we're going to execute. So behind here, and why? Well, because that's where performance comes from. Performance doesn't come from pontificating on what the plan should be, right? Performance comes from executing things that light fire in people in the organization. And so that's where I went. So one of the things I came up with was something I called cleanse the inside. So the idea behind cleanse the inside is that there's a lot of things that go on in an organization that impede performance. Okay. There are rules that the organization have that do nothing but annoy customers. There are bureaucratic procedures and so forth in the organization that impede people from doing their job, which results in not being able to execute, which results in not performing at breathtaking levels. So I went at this, and so I came up with a couple of programs within Cleanse the Inside, which nobody talks about. One was Kill Dumb Rules. Now I got a lot of flack for just calling them killing dumb rules, right? Roy, seriously, you're the president of the company. You can't call them that. And I said, okay, we're going to call it Kill Stupid Policies. How about that? Well, that didn't work. So I said, look, we all know that there's stupid things that customers just hate us for. It disables transactions. It doesn't enable them to do business with us. The purpose of the program is to identify those and either kill them or change them, right? And so what I did is I got the frontline people in the organization to identify dumb rules. And that's all you got to do is ask the people who deal with customers what's stupid, and they will tell you. And the challenge for leadership is we listen to them, right? So I had that program going. I would show up in the workplace with a white T-shirt with dumb rules on the front and back and a great big X's through there, right? So here comes Roy, the president, and he's going to talk to service reps and talk to operators. He's going to talk to everybody in the business, sales reps, about the stupid things that we do to annoy customers. That program was unbelievably successful, okay, because it gave a voice to the people who knew it all along, that we were doing things that we shouldn't have been doing because we'd always done them.
Right.
And the other one I did just very quickly is called Cut the Crap. I got a lot of crap over just calling it Cut the Crap too, by the way, but that was the same sort of thing, but it was about rules and procedures that stopped people from doing their job. So these were barriers on the inside, right? So it was part of the cleansing process. So as a leader, I tended to gravitate to coming up with those kinky, weird ideas that captured the hearts of people and made them believe in our journey and enabled them to do their jobs better and deliver breathtaking performance. Because at the end of the day, I did not do things just because they were kinky. I only did things that were kinky that could drive performance. Because at the end of the day, that's what I was being paid to do, is drive performance. That led to the billion. So I think some of that stuff probably worked. And there's a bunch of other stuff, but the same vein, move to a practical level, have the objective of listening to people, lighting their fires, and helping them do what they know is right. That's what we had to do. And I'm, as I say, I feel so proud that we had a leadership team that we didn't spend time in our offices. We spend time out in the workplace, listening and helping solve problems. That led to what I call my LBSA type of leadership. Leadership by serving around is what I called it. Not management around, serving around, looking for opportunities to help. So the watchword for me was, how can I help? Right? How can I help? How can I help? Simple stuff.
I really love that you went to the whole, more to the systems and processes on the internal, because I think a lot of times we spend a good bit of time looking at the way that we create customer experience through the human and the product side of things, but less about the processes and the, like you say, stupid rules and policies that make our customers upset with us. One of the things that I teach is called touch point mapping. And this is the idea of identifying all the human, product, and system ways that we create or impact on the customer experience. And just by mapping it out and seeing it as a big picture, you can look at each of those, we do it with circles. So if you look at each of those circles, you can say, how can I elevate my customer's experience in this one area? As management, we think, the management leadership of an organization, they think big picture. They're not necessarily looking at those little tiny details, right? But we can have a system for auditing our touch points within an organization, and empower, like you were talking about, employees to provide the information that we need in order to elevate that experience.
I mean, one of the things that I described it and used the process exactly the same, but I framed it around moments of truth. Because at that time, Jan Carlson from Scandinavian Airlines had coined the phrase moments of truth, but they're touch points. And what goes on in a moment of truth, determines whether you keep a customer or whether you create some sense of disloyalty and they go somewhere else. But the other part of it was to actually use that as a framework for re-engineering the business. having customers drive the process as opposed to systems engineers do it, okay, which is extremely inward focused. So I would actually have a panel of customers, and we would talk to them about a process, a system, and ask them, okay, how do you feel about this? So we tried to get their input in designing how we were able to do business with them. And I'll tell you what, they did two things. First of all, they were absolutely blown away that we would even ask them, that we cared enough about their opinion to ask them for their opinion. And secondly, we got some unbelievable kinds of suggestions. And so we tried to use that as a driver of process and systems development. The other thing that worked really, really well for us was the fact that I believe in micromanagement. Okay, there, I said it. All right, I'm a micromanager. I said it. Now, there's a caveat to that because the word strategic is an adjective to micromanagement. So I'm a strategic micromanager, unlike people who have been taught that that's a bad word and that they need to delegate everything. Okay, there are some things that you can delegate, but strategic things, never. What you and I are just talking about, most people would think as operations. It ain't. Anything that frames the customer experience,
That's right.
drives loyalty and performance in my world is strategic. And so I spend a lot of time helping architect what that customer moment looked like, what that touch point looked like. The president of the company, okay? Because that was the only way I could ensure that the objectives we were trying to satisfy would drive the performance that I was being expected to deliver. And so I had people saying, well, why on earth, Roy, are you getting involved in this? And that was a good question because it gave me an opportunity to talk about strategic micromanagement and get away from this sort of mindless delegation that I see go on in business of things that leaders should be doing themselves. If you don't put your fingerprints on a strategic issue, you're not doing your job. There's a quote.
Yeah, that's a great quote. And it really, management helps form the culture of a company. I mean, they drive it. And they drive it by demonstrating what's important. They drive it with the way they talk about the customers and the goals of the company. So when we were talking about, creating this customer experience and this awareness of it, that becomes part of the culture. If you're, as a manager, saying these things are important because this is driving the customer experience. And ultimately that creates raving fans, not just mediocre. Yeah, they did an okay job, but people who can't stop talking about your organization and the product or service that you provided. Yeah. Earlier, you mentioned about planning and the planning 20% and executing 80%. What I find interesting is that in my marketing agency and the Times to Thrive membership, working with business owners, very few do any planning. It seems like the plan is either in their head, which really isn't a plan because it will change on a whim, right? Or they forget. There's not a big picture if it's all in your head. It needs to be written down. Or the plan becomes whatever salesman sells them on, that particular marketing strategy in the moment. So their plan becomes whatever it is in the moment. So can you talk to the importance of planning and just how, not that it has to be complicated, and we teach systems for that too, but just speak to planning, because I think that's something that you recognize as being important, because if you don't know where you're going, you're definitely not getting there.
So a couple of points. First of all, I mean, small business typically, in my experience at least, don't like to plan because the process is cumbersome. It's cumbersome, it takes too much time, and quite often costs too much money. And they're just not willing to invest themselves or their energies in it. That's basically why I created this planning process around answering 3 questions. I mean, I do this in 2 days with clients. Okay, so they come in, we have a strategy that can be executed in 2 days. It's called strategic game plan. And it deals with questions that people don't find complicated. How big do you want to be? Who do you want to serve? How are you going to compete and win? I just take the answers to those three questions and create a game plan that we can then start to talk about in more granular terms about who needs to do what by when to actually make this happen. So the second point to this is that I mean somehow if we can get their minds around this in a short period of time, it's amazing how much fun they have with the process and how much they enjoy it. I mean, the notion of knowing in precise terms where you want to go is crazy. I don't advocate that. I advocate a planning process that says, let's head west. And the reason I say that, and that's an extreme description to make the point, that in a world of chaos and unpredictability, how can you ever think that you can be precise in your plan? You're setting yourself up to fail right off the bat. So I come up with this thing called heading west, planning on the run. Let's get it just about right. In other words, we're going to head west. I don't know if I'm going to end up in Vancouver or whether I'm going to end up in Los Angeles when I start. There are just too many variables to be accounted for, and I'm not smart enough to figure that out. In fact, nobody is, right? So we just directionally, notionally start heading west, and through execution and learning from that execution and adjusting, eventually we arrive at the right destination for us, given the circumstances that we encountered. And it could be neither of the two, it'll be somewhere else. So this whole notion of you don't have to get it right because you can't get it right. You can't get it right unless you start marching. You can't get it right until you start moving along and doing stuff. I mean, there's too much pontificating around possibilities as opposed to picking one and seeing if it's your destination. And to a small business, they're able to think that way a lot easier, okay, than actually somebody saying to them, well, we need a finite plan and it's got to be perfect. They know the world isn't perfect. They absolutely know that. And so once you admit it and create a process around it, that's where the 2080 comes from. Is like, yeah, you have to get your plan notionally right. That's the 20%. But let's spend the rest of our time just start marching and learning and adjusting. The planning on the run piece. My experience is that whole notion seems a lot more palatable for people because it's so practical.
Right.
And you won't find it. You won't find a marketing PhD talking this way, right? They promulgate stuff that's been sitting in that textbook for freaking decades that never worked then, and it won't work now. In fact, right now, it's more tenuous, right? Because the world is so much more dynamic, so much more unpredictable. And so, I think we've got to think a little bit squishy from time to time and do a bunch of imperfect stuff real fast. More tries you make, the more progress you're going to make. It's as simple as that. And we got to get comfortable with that. Small business get that. We just need to talk to them in those terms.
Right. Well, you speak my language, Roy. We are like a shared brain.
There you go.
A couple of years ago, our company worked on a development of a SaaS platform, software as a service.
Yep.
And in that process of working with a programmer and so on, we got really familiar with the agile methodology, which software kind of has the ones who have kind of pioneered this agile methodology where you do something you test it, you revise it, you tweak it, you relaunch it, and then just keep doing it cyclically. So one of the things kind of out of that, I built a system for doing a marketing plan in 30-day cycles. Because as you say, the world is changing so quickly that if we do a 1-year plan, 3 months in, we're already out of date. And it's not giving us the freedom to respond to what we're seeing, what's working, what's not working. And we're spending all this money on things that aren't working, where we could be redirecting that money into things that are, because we don't have that system in place to review. And that's a big part of what you're talking about. It's not about having a plan and then it's done and then I just execute the plan. It's almost like now I have a, lack of a better word, lifestyle of testing my plan, reviewing my plan, revising my plan, doing, responding to and reacting to things in the marketplace, and having an understanding of how that's relevant to me. So you and I, Roy, are completely on the same page.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the plan's a draft. It'll always be a draft. But the problem is we've been taught through school to finish the project. We've been taught, because if we finish the project well, we get an A or B or C or whatever, and then we move on to something else. So it's very much part of our culture, right, to actually be driven to complete something. It's a little more difficult to be faced with, let's create a forever draft. And yet that's what planning process needs to be morphed to. That's the only thing that worked for me. And today, I mean, the dynamics are so much more extreme. I think it's even more important. Don't you wonder, with all these changes going on around us, why on earth do we have leaders who continue to do the same old stuff? They continue to listen to the same old stuff. They continue to try to implement the stuff that doesn't work in the hopes that maybe this time it will. Well, by the way, we know that's a definition of insanity.
Right. In my corporate years, one thing that I noticed is that there were no new ideas. Nothing was original, but they always treated it like it was. Oh, we're going to a silo system. Well, didn't we do that 10 years ago? Oh no, this is a new take on the silo system. Like just the way they would set up management and org charts and, all the things.
You're so right. So I have a phrase for that. It's you can put lipstick on a pig and it's still a pig. Okay. I don't care what you call it. You can put lipstick on it and try and dress it up, because the SMEs, apparently this is a new breed of expert in the organizations. They actually control the destiny of organizations, and leaders let them do it. Subject matter experts. It's because leaders don't think for themselves. They don't trust themselves. They are more comfortable listening to the dogma of the experts and be persuaded by their arguments, as opposed to thinking what's best for their company, their employees, and their customers. The feeling leader, Bethany, is missing. Okay. And feelings, as you know, are so important because they drive purchase decisions. They drive loyalty, employee loyalty. They drive values that actually matter in the universe. And yet we want to be objective. We just don't want to be a feeling person. Well, I got to tell you, feeling leaders, in my experience, are way ahead of the pack.
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up, because I actually yesterday did a Facebook Live about trusting your gut and getting out of your head. And like what you're talking about is we've been discouraged from trusting our gut. Our gut could be wrong. We need facts. We need data. We need the survey, right?
Yes. We need 3 years worth of study.
Right. and more, as a business leader, more often than not, our guts are right. Our instincts are good. And, we need to learn to trust that and, ignore the so-called leaders. I'm reading a book right now, or listening to it, but I listen to books more than I read them, but it's called Believe It. And it's from the woman who started It Cosmetics. And the first time that 3 years of rejection, 3 years of no's, 3 years of not one retailer accepting her product. And she got an opportunity to do a 10-minute spot on QVC. The QVC consultants are all telling her, you must use these young, perfect looking models. And she's like, my gut is saying that it needs to be about real women and real women's issues. And all of that. But then she's second guessing herself because the experts are telling her, no, no, this is how it's done. This is the formula for success. It's tried and true. You must follow it or it'll be a disaster. Ultimately, she trusted her gut. And it was a wild success. I mean, they sold out and had half again as many on a waiting list. And she went on to create $1 billion+ company that she sold to L'Oreal for $1.2 billion and became their first female CEO because she trusted her gut instead of the so-called experts.
Well, it's an excellent example, okay, of going that way. I mean, if you break this thing down, we are basically taught not to accept risk, notwithstanding the fact that, I mean, there's how many volumes of books on risk management. What they basically say is don't take a risk. Let's minimize the risk. Well, as soon as you take the minimum risk position, your bias to act is diminished immediately, right? And so we have to encourage people to try. I mean, I think tries are a strategic concept, and we should have objectives for everybody in companies to try things. And we need to create values in a culture and degrees of freedom that permits that and rewards people for the number of tries they make. I mean, there's so many sports metaphors that driven out of this whole concept, but they apply equally to careers, and they apply equally to our lives, and they apply equally to organizations. And so, I mean, I used to honor people that screwed up a lot because at least they were doing something. You can't tell when somebody's using their left brain. You can't tell, but you sure as hell can tell if they're using their right brain, because it absolutely is translated into action, and action is execution, and execution is performance. And that's the behavior that I was constantly looking for. And if it didn't work out, okay, but I would never let you make the same mistake twice. That's not allowed, right?
And
so
we
there
have
were
to learn. We need to know what the lesson was.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So I know we're running out of time. I could probably talk to you for hours, but
Me too.
If there was one thing that you wanted a business owner to really hold on to from today's episode, what is that one thing that they need to get right?
You need to be different. If you're not different, you're dead, or soon will be. I mean, that's it. Okay, it's harsh language, but I can't think of anything that is more consequential of the inability to be special than saying an organization will die, because they do. Just look around you. Big ones, small ones, mediums. And if you really dissect the reason for their death, the majority of cases is they're irrelevant. And why are they irrelevant? They're irrelevant because they're not different in a meaningful way to the customers that they serve. So my whole thing is, you got to stop what you're doing, take a step back, and ask yourself the question, how can I be different in a way that my people, my customers, care about? Like, it's not being different for the sake of being different. That's not what I'm saying. A lot of people take that away because they think it gives them permission to be stupid. Well, that's not what I'm saying. Right? So be different in a meaningful, special way that people care about, and distance yourself from the herd. I talk a lot about the herd. The herd, you may think it's comfortable and it's warm and cozy and, there's not a lot of conflict, but it's traditional, it's average. And if you want to be average, that's fine. Stay in a herd. If you want to grow, if you want a magnificent, breathtaking business, you have to be different. And you can start that today. Simple one way to do that is, I call it my Be Different lens. All you got to do is, every time you have a challenge, and it can start with the planning process that I outlined, you say, how can I do this differently? And what we need to do as people is get up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to do something different today. What should I do? It's a mindset that translates, it's transferable into how you spend your life, how you spend your career, and how you run your business. And the reason it's so powerful is nobody else does it. And so you have a built-in mechanism to differentiate yourself when you start thinking this way, right? And there's no prescription for it. I'm not being prescriptive. What I'm saying is, as an idea, I've seen it work for 40 years. I doubt that it's going to stop working. Why don't you give it a try? Be
Yeah,
different.
I love that you said mindset, because what the way we've been talking about it sounds like very procedural. Hey, you just do this and then do that. The problem is business owners resist because of a limiting belief, or because they have fear, or because they have imposter syndrome. And so,
Yes, very true.
that's a whole, we could do a whole show on that,
We could.
boy.
Yes, we could.
So just being self-aware of anything that's holding you back from the correct mindset, and the way you serve your customers. I often say too, you are not your customer. A
Yeah,
lot of
exactly.
business owners run their business like they are.
I know. That's a great point. It's a great point. I mean, just encouraging them to look out instead of in is a huge thing. It's
Yeah,
because they think they're giving something up when they think this way, right? So they don't see it as an empowering, liberating tool for growth, and yet that's exactly what it is. So we have some educating to do of our own stuff, right?
yeah, for sure. Well, where can people connect with you and learn more about you and the services that you offer?
Yeah, so come and visit me at bedifferentorbedead.com is my website. And I have a blog on there. I've been blogging about my stuff since 2009 when I wrote my very first book. That was the Business Survival Guide. So there's a lot of content resources. And you know what? The interesting thing I find, and I'll have a conversation like this with you, and it tweaks me on some aspect of my stuff that I haven't really talked about before. And so that seems to be the source of my blog. So I'm getting more granular and more and broader and deeper on the Be Different or Be Dead concepts. So come on, subscribe to the blog, read it, give me some feedback. I blog every Monday, relentlessly since 2009, and I'm still excited about the content. But the other thing is, I'm happy for people to contact me directly. I have an email, roy.osing@gmail.com. Give me an email, draft your only statement, fire it to me, ask me what I think about it, and I'd be happy to engage with people, because you know what? That's the only way you're going to get real change, is like one-on-one and sort of getting that Be Different or Be Dead virus spread, Bethany. That's what we're
Right.
trying to do here, get the virus spread so that it catches on. And yeah, so hopefully those resources will be of help.
Roy, amazing, amazing show. Lots of great nuggets. I'm going to have fun dissecting these up into 1 minute to thrives, and appreciate you coming on the show.
You're very welcome. And look, I'm grateful for the opportunity. I really am. Thanks.